John Gonzalez from The Ringer. He wrote about that very question. Do you think the processors and the anti-processors will ever see eye to eye at any point in their lives, Gonzo?
No, that's the great divide of our time, Mike.
Isn't it amazing? I mean, it's like amazing that you make a trade like that on draft night and it just re-split everybody. Like if there was any mending of the fence, like, all right, I like this team, that trade almost re-split everybody back up.
Yeah, I was really sort of surprised by some of the reaction to it, to be honest with you, because I thought it was so perfectly in keeping with what has happened in the process era. I was actually kind of surprised that Brett Brown, who was acting in a dual capacity, was able to say, okay, well, Kel Bridges could have really helped us this season, but if we go and add an extra pick, that could help us add a superstar down the line when we're putting a package together, and that extra asset is more valuable, so I'm going to think about the long term and put on my front office hat here. I thought that was like a really smart, shrewd, very processy decision, and that there are people who are ostensibly pro-process who don't see that or don't appreciate it or somehow think that the Sixers are being disloyal makes very little sense to me.
Well, and you have that other camp that thinks that you're consistently kicking the can down the road and that it's always about the next season or 3 seasons down the road, and it's never about the one that is currently in front of you.
Yeah, that's sort of specious reasoning, though. I think that people who think that way and go, well, you got to do it right now, aren't probably paying enough attention and probably don't understand the machinations of how these things work. That asset for 2021 could very well help them right now. That's one more thing that they could use to throw into a package to get a Kawhi Leonard or another name player who might be on the move or might be available. And that people think that that's somehow only going to be used 3 years from now is incorrect reasoning.
John Gonzalez from The Ringer is with us. So if it's not Mikal Bridges played at Villanova, mom works for the Sixers, is there any anger?
I don't know. Probably not. I mean, that's a really good point because, let's be honest. How many, unless you're really, really deep into the NBA and really, really deep into the draft, how many people who are upset right now would be upset if it had been the reverse, if it had been Zaire Smith, and then instead they traded him for, I don't know, Kevin Knox or something. Anybody who wasn't Mikal Bridges who went to Villanova and was in their backyard, and so therefore that provincial parochial attitude rears up and they go, well, that's our guy. That's the local guy. Well, okay, great. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean he's the best pick. And also you've got to consider everything together. Is Mikal Bridges by himself better than Zaire Smith and that extra asset that could help you go out and get another guy? And I just don't think he is.
John, Brett Brown essentially is the first guy in a while to essentially say, it was me. I take responsibility for this. And if it goes wrong, I'm the guy. Is that a good thing? Do we like Brett Brown essentially being the face, the voice, the everything of the 76ers?
So this one is also sort of nuanced. I think right now, as a steward of the organization, who, that needs somebody to be the final decision maker and decide, okay, this is our options, and Eversley and Cohen and Elton Brand and all the other analytics guys that are in the front office are presenting him with options, and they're going to make a collaborative decision, but he's ultimately going to be the guy who decides. That's fine in a short-term basis. Long-term basis, not good. You don't want your head coach to be your main guy in the front office. It's just too much to do. And we've seen it over and over and over again in the NBA, from Doc Rivers to Stan Van Gundy to Mike Budenholzer in Atlanta. It's just not – it's a recipe for disaster. So I think right now, out of necessity, great. Brett did a great job on draft night, as did the entire front office team for the Sixers, making a very difficult decision to pick up that extra asset, even though they're going to get criticized for it in terms of PR. But I think long-term, that is not a solution.
John Gonzalez at The Ringer asked, who is running the Sixers? I don't know if you write your own headlines, but that's the question that the story essentially asks. So let me ask you, if you think where the team is right now and the way they made that trade the other night, it was kind of like their, homage to Sam, like, hey, we still remember you. Thank you for leading us down this direction. Do you think now is the time to bring in an outside voice, or should they stick with Brett or somebody in the organization and just kind of keep going with what they've got here? Or do you think they need to go outside the organization and find somebody?
I'm sort of torn between, because of the early returns. I mean, Eversley and Cohen were really spearheading the what can we put in front of Brett menu platter, let's say. And so it looked like, pretty good options so far. So kudos to them. I think, for me, at the very least, they should have those outside conversations and go and talk to a Mike Zarin from Boston and a Gershon Rosas from Houston. And, there's a couple of other candidates around the league where you go, okay, let's at least talk to those guys. The reason why they couldn't do that pre-draft is because the timing was just too tight. This is the busiest time of year for NBA front offices. You've got the draft, then you've got free agency. It's an absolute killer. And nobody who's really worth interviewing would be available to do that right now. It would be terrible optics. They would be seen as disloyal. You'd have to wonder about what kind of proprietary information they were giving away to the Sixers in that scenario. Then they'd have to cobble together a staff. It'd be a Herculean task. So you're going to have to get through free agency before you can actually interview any of these main candidates.
Is that a good thing that you're going to go into free agency with instability there? I mean, so then just a free agent, or say a LeBron James or a Paul George or somebody to that ilk, you hire a free agent that they don't really jive with, or essentially they have input on who your next free agent is, or that's where it's a very odd situation.
Yeah, and that's what I wrote about today, that it's hyper complicated. Is it a good thing? It's not a good thing. It's a spot that you don't want to be in, but they are in that spot, and they could not have envisioned it, and then it's not their fault. I think, to their credit, they're doing the best possible job that they can do. And look, Eversley and Cohen are smart guys, and they've got some smart guys in that front office to help them as lieutenants. And Brett Brown obviously is doing his level best to marshal this entire thing and be the leader that the organization is desperately in need of right now. But you're right. Like, you have to go into those free agent meetings with a pitch that, look, we've got this little group. Brett's in charge. We know what we're doing. Come here, because ultimately you're not picking the situation because you really super like the general manager. You're picking it because, I get to go and play with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, and I think if I come here, we could win.
Gonzo, how much do you know, can you tell about Eversley? I mean, he would seem to be like, all right, we've come this far. Why don't we have Brett kind of being, at the top of the food chain, but Mark is maybe the guy who puts the reports together. He kind of puts it all together and just, go from there.
Yeah, I think that's like sort of the inverse of what I would like to see happen. I think if they're going to hire from within, they should hire from within. If it's going to be Eversley, it should be Eversley. If it's going to be Cohen, it should be Cohen. And they should continue to get input from Brett Brown, and he should be a valuable part of the organization, and he should have his voice heard. But I think asking him to really wade through the minutia of these decisions and to really look at cap space structure and value of assets moving forward and the way that the CBA shifts and how the luxury tax impacts your team long term, and 2 years from now, what's going to happen if we have to sign Dario, and also Ben Simmons is going to be due. That's so much to have to deal with on top of being the head coach. Mm-hmm. I would much prefer that Brett is just sort of an advisor capacity for front office needs rather than like he's going to make the decision.
Yeah, I know it's kind of odd nowadays to have that guy be the be everything and be all. But you write about, what happened with Steve Clifford in Charlotte, and he's basically out of a job because they didn't want to listen to him. So I guess it's a difficult thing to balance between being a guy who runs an organization and also coaches the team. And then if you don't have that title, how much input do they allow you to have?
Previously with Brett, very little. I mean, there were moments with Hinkie where, Sam was sort of a sphinx, and even his closest advisors really didn't know what he was ultimately going to do. And with Brian Colangelo, as we've seen from reports, Brian was thinking about maneuvering Mike D'Antoni into that spot until Mike D'Antoni took the Houston job. So I think what we've learned here is Brett should be a valuable voice. He is a valuable voice, and he should continue to be listened to. However, there's a difference between, hey, here's my input, you're listening to me, thank you for that, I've got a lot to say, and I want to be involved in the decision-making process too. You're going to bring me everything, and I'm going to be the one to decide. Those are two different things, and I think ultimately they need to find somebody who's autonomous to be the front office frontman.
Right, because, John, there's like a balance between the coach having too much say in this is the guy that we have to get, and somebody saying, well, I've done all of this scouting and all of this reporting on this player, and I'm disagreeing with you. And then as you kind of chronicled that an executive told you, like the football analogy, that if you have 4 quarterbacks, that usually means you don't have one.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, like, I think look, these are hard jobs, right? And they're disparate skill sets. Being a head coach does not, just because you're a good head coach does not mean you're going to be a good front office executive. And there are plenty of front office executives that couldn't diagram you a play or have absolutely no feel for players and team chemistry and things of that nature. So I think you want some sort of like Venn diagram where there is overlap and there's communication between front office and coach, but it's also a clear delineation of responsibility.
Yeah, but like you pointed out in the article that Brown making this decision at least showed that his coaching hat didn't allow him to get blinded by the decision at hand, which was potentially 3 years down the road, a trade down the road, or taking the better player just right now, which I guess has to stand for something.
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely to Brett's credit. I mean, like I said, I was frankly a little bit surprised because head coaches can sometimes be blinded by their own, like, right now in the moment needs. And Brett was not blinded by that, and that is kudos to Brett. He gets salutations on that one. But I wonder, long term, how viable that is, because eventually you're going to get out on the court and you're like, he desperately wants a star right now, right? So is there a world where he goes, hey, I'm going to go the opposite way. Not only am I going to, like, not just pick the guy for right now in the draft, I'm going to trade a bunch of dudes on our team in order to get that superstar and completely mortgage the future. There's a scenario where it goes the polar opposite. So I just think, like, divorcing your coach from that just makes sense for so many different reasons.
John Gonzalez from The Ringer is with us. Of course, he said famously the other night, we are star hunting or we are star developing. That's how you win championships. So how do you interpret Brett Brown with we are star hunting after what he did? Does that – everybody's like, well, then he has to be thinking about a Kawhi Leonard trade. So how did you interpret his passionate plea of we are star hunting, that's why we make this trade?
I think that it's perfectly in keeping with what we've heard from Brett over the last couple of years, and even specifically right after they got bounced by the Celtics. He said, look, there's this, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said that there's this segment of the fan base that thinks we're good, that it's organic, and that we should just keep going with the homegrown guys, and we don't need to go out and look for these other external superstars or stars. And he said, I completely disagree with that. We need more. And I'm with him. They do need more because right now, with the pieces that they have, they're going to be a very good team. But they are behind the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference because they're going to add two guys for nothing that are all-stars and top-tier players. And then beyond that, even if they somehow do get past the Celtics, then you've got the Western Conference looming. So as currently constituted, they don't have enough. He's 100% right about it. And I think, like, the devil, though, is in the detail. How do you go out and get that star? They're star hunting. That's a big difference. I wrote this in the piece.
Yes.
I completely agree with star hunting. That's different than star acquiring. How do you acquire it, and at what cost?
Well, it's essentially what got him here, which was, look, for us to get stars, we have to be bad enough to get them. But if you are where we are today, and as I just said, we got to forget how we got here. This is where they are. They do need more. I think we all agree on that. And maybe that's just because of the landscape of the league has changed so much. Before, you needed 2 stars. Now you need 4. So is that an indictment on how they got here if you still need more?
No, because you have to start. I mean, everything, you start somewhere, right? Started from the bottom. Here they are. It's just that the league is ever shifting. So, like, they had excellent, and still do, cap space, cap room. They could still get rid of Jared Bayless somehow, free up even more space, and then all of a sudden you're really in line for max level free agents. But they acquired all those assets under Henke, and they used some of them under Colangelo, but they're still in fairly good shape. The problem is that, like, you know, you're not the only team in the league doing that, right? The Boston Celtics have done a massive – like, I hate the Celtics as much as anybody else from Philadelphia. But Danny Ainge is a genius. He has, on the fly, rebuilt that team, and also they could have as many as 4 first-round picks next year. That's in addition to the team they already had, and they're going to add Gordon Hayward and Kawhi Leonard. So you look at it and you go, like, we're in a good spot. They're in a better spot. We need more.
You write that star hunting and star acquiring are two very different things, and that's just where things get a little sticky for the Sixers. So where do you see them here on a week before free agency starts, and their resume to make their pitches? If you are star hunting and star acquiring and it being tricky, do you think they could have had a better resume for trades and free agents than they currently do?
I think they're in a good spot. I really do. I think that you can go, even with the uncertain foundation, and make a serious push to Paul George, who, by all accounts, looks like right now he's the favorite to stay in Oklahoma City, and then beyond that, if he was going to move, it's probably going to be L.A. But you pitch him, and you say, this is all the things that we have, and you should come here. You can pitch LeBron James, and like that's not going to be as tough a sell because he has the same agent and as Ben Simmons, and they're buddies and the whole bit. And you can say, look, you come here, maybe we can also acquire Kawhi. Wouldn't LeBron and Kawhi together with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid be a monster? I mean, all of a sudden now they're the favorites in the Eastern Conference. Certainly they would be one of the best defending teams in the NBA. So I think you're in a good spot. You've got an opportunity here. It is just, can you do it? This is the critical time for the organization. The draft was complicated. This will be more so.
Which goes back to the Ringer article that John wrote, who's running the team and making those decisions. There's a lot of decisions to make. Of the guys who are available, LeBron, Kawhi, Paul George, which one's the most realistic?
Great question. Paul George, I think, is the least realistic of those options. LeBron is a possibility. Kawhi, I think you have a shot at. I really do, because they're going to have to move him. It doesn't look great. I know that they said that they're not going to be bullied into this, but he has some leverage there in that he's going to walk after this year, and you don't want him to walk for nothing. And they've already said they don't want to trade him to the Western Conference. Who does that leave? Well, in the Eastern Conference, that always leaves the Celtics because they've got so many different picks and players that they can throw at the situation. But it also leaves the Sixers. I mean, the Sixers could put together an attractive package with some combination of Fultz and Dario and Robert Covington and that unprotected 2021, maybe one of their own picks. I mean, there's a situation here where the Sixers could go out and grab him. The question is, can they sell him on re-signing? Because if not, and you go out and get him and then he walks, that's really not good. You don't want that.
You wrote that a longtime league executive said the Sixers' job is, quote, maybe the most desirable in the NBA. But my question is Brett Brown also noticing that and doesn't want to give it up?
No, I think Brett has said he didn't want
He did say that, but now that he's got a taste of it, John, of, you know what, this is kind of, you know what I mean?
I do hear what you're saying. I'd be surprised if that was the case. I don't think Brett really wants this long term. But who knows? I mean, everything, things change, right? People, like you said, get a taste for certain things or maybe realize that they like it or are better at it than they might have anticipated. I think more likely he'd probably prefer just to be a coach and go and do that. He's really good at it. I know I would prefer that, and I think that, they'd have an opportunity here once they get a little bit farther past free agency to go and talk to some top-tier candidates and say, this gig's available. Like, what could you make of it?
Any scary – I guess, it sounds ridiculous to even ask this question, but you hire a GM, and what happens? The GM usually wants to bring in his own guy. I'm not suggesting he's going to come right in and fire Brett Brown, but then as the coach, aren't you back under the microscope again?
Maybe, yeah. But at this point where Brett is in his career – he's under the microscope, and he hasn't shied away from that. And he knows that he is. Last year he and I talked about it, where he said, it's not going to be now just I'm this guy who was here while we were rebuilding. Now people are going to judge me on, can we win? How far can we go to the playoffs? Are we contending for a championship? And he didn't shy away from that. He relished it. So I think he's okay with that. I think he knows it.
John Gonzalez, read this piece at The Ringer. It's really good about who is running the Sixers. So, John, the best case for you, is there a guy that you think is the perfect fit to run the 76ers?
I'm a big fan of both Mike Zarin and Christian Rosas. So if they could get either of those guys, it would be great. I think it's going to be complicated and difficult to pry either of them away from their organizations because they're big and integral parts of those franchises, the Celtics and the Rockets, respectively. But look, you can go and start really looking into – look, nobody knew really – like Sam Hinkie, people in the NBA knew Sam Hinkie, but nobody really was talking about him before he was hired. He ended up being a really smart, clever, valuable find for the Sixers. There are other up-and-coming executives in the league that you can go and talk to who are smart people who are waiting for an opportunity to run their own shop. Go and talk to them. Do the due diligence. Take your time because you're already into a critical period anyway, so what's a little bit longer?
What are you doing with Fultz?
See how that shot goes. You got to wait.
Would you move him?
He's here in LA right now, so he's working on that shot. I wouldn't. Would I move him? It depends. What's his shot look like? What can I get in return?
If I told you the man has the yips, and that's documented now, that's what the man said. Does that worry you more than it did 2 weeks ago when we were still like, I don't know what happened with this guy?
I think if you're talking about what Drew Hanlon said about him, his trainer, he said he had the yips and they were going to fix the shot.
Yeah.
I believe supremely in Drew Hanlon. He's really, really good and works with a lot of very qualified, quality NBA players. If he can fix the shot, then all of a sudden Markelle Fultz is exactly what this team needs, and he becomes a valuable component.
Is it better to you that it was the yips as opposed to this man's shoulder prevented him from being able to shoot?
Probably not. No, actually, I'd probably be more worried about it being the yips than it being the shoulder, because the shoulder, in theory, you'd be like, okay, well, like, it's medicine and it's science,
right?
As opposed to it being mental, and mental is something else and something that he would have to overcome. But I want to see what he looks like coming out of this off-season period, where all he has to do all summer long, probably won't play in summer league. He's going to spend the entire summer in Los Angeles shooting. What's he look like after that? We'll go from there.
You bring back J.J. Redick. He's 34.
Also depends on what else you're doing. How many years are you going to give him? How much money? And also, do you have the space? Like, if you go out and get a LeBron, that's going to be a lot less money for J.J. Redick, but you're going to be happy about that scenario. If you don't get a LeBron, you don't get a Kawhi, you don't get a Paul George, then you're looking at J.J. and you're thinking, okay, 3 years, how much? 3 years would make him 36 at the end of the contract. It's pushing it. Yeah. So it's a cost over value equation.
Last one for Gonzo. If they don't get a LeBron or a Kawhi or someone of that ilk, is there someone else you have your eye on?
Therein lies the complicated question, right? And that's where you need a front office person who's got a dedicated job and like a specific vision, because then it's not easy. Then it's like, okay, are we allocating funds this offseason or are we waiting? Are we trying to go and trade for somebody who might have fallen out of favor or is available with another team? Like Toronto has said that their entire team is available. Do you want a Kyle Lowry at this point in his career? You need a point guard potentially. If you don't have Markelle Fultz, somebody who could shoot and play next to Ben Simmons. These are all questions that are going to be like critical and also very complicated.
John Gonzalez from The Ringer, everybody, here on the Sports Bash on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thanks, Gonzo. Appreciate it.
Always enjoy it.